So welcome to the latest webinar in our Engineerica Education Keynote series. We are so very pleased to be bringing you this complimentary presentation. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are new to us, Engineerica, we're a software company specializing in academic center management systems for higher education. So you might be familiar with some of our products such as Academia and AcuCampus. And of course, I want to give a special welcome to any Engineerica clients joining us today. And I also want to let you know that if you are interested in seeing more presentations like this live and in person, we are hosting a 3-day Academic Center Summit. This is a 3-day professional development conference held near our company headquarters over in Orlando, Florida. It is geared towards academic center managers and their employees. Last year was a really awesome event. We had a keynote speakers Michael Frizzell and Corey Hammond, and this year's keynote speaker is going to be Sandra McGuire. We are really looking forward to hosting that, and we are going to be on the grounds of the UCF, of the University of Central Florida. We are going to be featuring a tour of the UCF SARC, the Student Academic Resource Center. We're going to have a lot of breakout sessions. We have a fun and unique excursion plan to downtown Winter Park, which is a very underrated but lovely part of Central Florida. Lots of opportunities to connect and network with folks from across the country. So if you are interested in that, I will paste the link to that in the chat, or if Mark is able to do it in just a moment there. All right, and for those of you who are not yet clients, I do want to let you know we are offering a complimentary trial, a semester trial of our most popular center management system, which is Academia. This gives you the opportunity to use it for an entire semester risk-free to see if it helps make management of your center and your data collection easier. And if you're interested, you can email me at rachelc@engineerica.com. I'll also paste that in the chat in just a moment. So we started this keynote series for our clients and our contacts who wanted to learn more about best practices and trends in higher education. And each month we feature a distinguished speaker to talk about hot topics in the academic support field. So we are still finalizing the details for next month. So we will send out an announcement when that is ready. So keep an eye on your emails and our social media channels for that. A quick introduction to myself. I am Rachel Cook. I am a client success manager with Engineerica. I was previously a learning center manager at the community college level for 6 years. So like you all, I am very passionate about higher education student success. I love getting to bring these sessions to you all. I also have with me my colleague Mark Kehoe. He is one of our technical support specialists. He is here as my backup and to help with any technical issues that may come up. All right, with all that said, I am pleased to introduce you to this month's speaker. Seana Chaves is the Assistant Program Manager for the Learning Center at the West Campus for Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. Pima Community College is a 2-year institution with an enrollment of about 17,000 students. Along with the day-to-day oversight of the campus learning center, she has also managed the embedded tutoring program since 2020. Pima's embedded tutoring program is continuing to grow and is now averaging 25 to 30 embedded tutors covering 70+ CRNs this past year. Seana has co-written and published a paper on embedded tutoring as well and presented on embedded tutoring multiple times. We know this is a hot topic in the field and we are so excited to be hosting her today. So I am going to go ahead and hand things over to you, Seana.
All right. I appreciate that introduction. And thank you everybody for attending today so that we can talk a little bit about embedded tutoring and the best way to manage the program. So as Rachel said, a little bit about myself. Pima Community College is here in Tucson, Arizona. We are in about 115-degree weather today. So a little bit warm, but we're staying cool inside. And we are an HSI designated institution. We have 5 different campuses that make up our college, and we also have quite a large online presence as well. A little bit more about me. I have been with the college since 2008, and I have been in and around the Learning Center ever since in various roles. In 2019, I did become the Learning Center manager for our West Campus. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, our 5 separate learning centers became one virtual learning center. And we split up all of the Learning Center duties amongst the managers, and I ended up getting placed with the Embedded Tutor program. How, I'm not quite sure, because I didn't really have a lot of background with active learning or with what embedded tutoring really meant, but we ran with it, and here I am today. Much better understanding of it, and I'd like to kind of tell you a little bit about it. So in 2022, I saw a survey go out on the Learn Assist listserv about embedded tutoring. It led me to working with a wonderful group of learning assistance staff across the U.S. And we worked together to help define what an embedded tutoring model looked like and how to start the program. We presented on the topic 3 different times, once in October of 2022 on our own, just to see if anybody had any interest in what we wanted to talk about or hearing what we had to say. Apparently we had I think we had over 100 people show up for that one. So again, in May of 23, we did another webinar for innovative educators. And then we were asked to be a spotlight presenter for the 49th annual ACLA conference. So we presented again in that. By the fall of 2023, we actually were able to publish our article through the Learning Assistance Review Journal called An Embedded Tutor Model. And I'll use a little bit of what we did in that today. So first off, a little bit of what we're going to go through today. Going to go through a little bit of the background of where our college has been with embedded tutoring and our journey to get to where we are today. Some best practices that we have learned along the way, and we will finish off with talking about some data, because that's always an important part of any program. All right, so that we're all on the same page, what we will be using the following definition of embedded tutoring that we have outlined in the article that I wrote with my coworkers. So an embedded tutor attends synchronous classes regularly, providing individualized attention and assistance during active learning activities to help clarify course concepts while motivating students' participation and engagement in the classroom. The embedded tutor also provides open tutoring hours outside of the classroom to provide extra assistance and further engage the students with available academic resources. We'll move on. All right. So our college's journey to get to this definition started over 10 years ago, when we started exploring new ways to help support our students in courses. We especially wanted to work with developmental education courses and those with low success rates. We wanted to find other ways that we could connect with our students, especially those that struggle to ask for help, because they're typically the ones that won't reach out and ask for help. So we wanted to bring the resource to them. We tried supplemental instruction at first, and we quickly found that the students were not big at attending supplemental instruction workshops. So that didn't last very long at our institution. We tried what we called tutored linked courses at the same time. And this was essentially us identifying some of our tutors that were already working for us in the learning centers that were qualified to tutor certain courses. And then we promoted their hours to the classes. We worked with the instructors to get a little more information about the class so that they could know where the students were in the material. It showed a little bit more promise than what we were getting with the supplemental instruction workshops, but it wasn't quite what we were interested in. And so we just kept digging a little bit further to see where else we could go. In 2019, we began experimenting with placing a tutor in a few courses where instructors were willing to try it out and see if to help the students in the class. We wanted to see if the students would engage more with this tutor being in the class as opposed to being outside of the class. We did start seeing more engagement according to the tutors, and the instructors thought that it was helping the students overall throughout the class. This is what we started to call embedded tutoring at our institution. In 2020, just like everybody else, we rapidly expanded our embedded tutoring program due to the pandemic. we were trying to figure out what to do with all of our staff and how to connect students with the resources when there was no physical space or virtual, and virtual was still fairly new to everyone. Our tutors were placed into developmental education courses like English as a second language, our lower level math, and our lower level writing. Our Dean of Developmental Education at the time had requested tutors be placed with instructors that actually requested tutors be placed into their classes, but he also had requested that tutors be placed into specific courses based on success and retention rates, regardless of whether the instructor requested them or not. We went along with it. We worked with it for a while, figured it was okay for the short term as we had a lot of available staff and budget, and it gave us an ability to test embedded tutoring out in many different types of classes. But we knew eventually in the long run it wouldn't be sustainable to do the number of classes that we were currently working with. What we learned through the program was that a lot of the instructors that didn't request the tutor weren't actually using them, and it wasn't a great use of our resources. We also learned that for those instructors that weren't using active learning and were mostly lecture-based classes, it wasn't really helpful to have the tutor in the class because there wasn't any time for the tutors to actually work with the students during the class time. And the last thing that we struggled with during this time period was trying to figure out how to connect tutors to the students in the fully asynchronous classes. So we used that information, and when we came back to on-campus courses in 2021, we kept the program going, but we decided to make a few changes. We started embedding tutors in classes based on instructor request and limiting them only to classes that had synchronous components to them. This was much more manageable with the resources that we had available, especially with trying to keep both the embedded tutor program running and 5 campus learning centers. During this time, we also started to try and keep a virtual presence going as well. Things were going well. Tutors were being utilized a lot more, but we did find that there was a few instances where instructors were utilizing our tutors more as TAs rather than tutors. And so we wanted to try and figure out how to limit that even more. In 2022, as we were becoming more comfortable with the model, we started standardizing our training practices and for both the tutors and the instructors. When we returned to in-person work, I retained oversight of our program at large, but the oversight of the courses and the tutors went back to our managers at the individual learning centers at the campuses where the courses were held. This meant that there were now 6 of us training our folks, and we needed something that would allow us to present a united and consistent message to the instructors and to the tutors. So we also wanted to be able to address those issues with the tutors being used more as a TA than as a tutor. So what we did was we went ahead and we created our training shelves in our learning management system, and I'll show you those in just a little bit. And we use those for consistency and also as a place for the tutors and the instructors to be able to go back and review the material as needed. In 2023, again, we were trying to make sure we were continuing to improve our program and make sure that it was the best that it could be. We made more updates, and we included standardizing and implementing an observation in the classroom during each semester, and we also created an embedded tutor agreement form, and we will get into those in just a little bit as well. This is a little bit about our program currently over the last 2 years or so. The types of classes that we get a lot of requests for our embedded tutors, we get quite a few math classes, quite a few anatomy and physiology. We have some pretty consistent courses in English as a second language and Japanese. And then we also get a few here and there between writing, reading, engineering, and chemistry. On the left-hand side, you'll see our numbers for our unduplicated head count of how many actual embedded tutors we have each semester. As you can see, it is definitely increasing. Last semester, we increased quite a few, and we are hoping that that continues, and it looks like it is for this semester. Um, and on the right-hand side, you'll see the number of CRNs that we have embedded tutors placed into. So again, in this last spring semester, it has gone up quite a bit. For the sake of space on this slide, I did not include our numbers for the summer program, but usually we have about 6 to 10 additional CRNs for our summer program as well. For this upcoming fall semester, I already have 37 CRNs confirmed for our embedded tutoring program, with at least 23 unduplicated embedded tutors, and we have another 10 CRNs potentially in the works. So seems like our program is doing pretty well. We're hoping that it continues to go that way. So a lot of you might be asking, where does the budget come from for this? And what we are lucky enough in our institution to have administration that really tries to emphasize and promote our services. So we get our budget from our general funds, and each campus has its own separate budget. We do have to balance the number of embedded tutor courses that we have with the need to make sure that we have coverage at our learning center. So we have to play that nice balance game and see where we can put stuff while also still maintaining our level of coverage in the learning center. We've used our data in the past to collect and to justify the amount that we have requested for each of our campuses. And as we continue to grow, hopefully we can use that data to justify the increased numbers that we will be asking for. Yeah.
So we're getting a couple questions. Again, we're going to take most of those at the end. We are flagging them, so don't worry. But I wanted to just kind of highlight one really quick because it's a little time sensitive. So we have a question of what CRN stands for. So I think a lot of folks would be familiar with that, but just in case there's a few that aren't, I think we should clarify. It stands for course registration number. So all of the courses at a school have a CRN, and then usually like a section number. So like all the English 101 classes are going to have the same CRN, and then section 1, 2, 3, or however they number them as an example. So I just wanted to clarify that before we move on, just in case there's more than one folks in there that are not 100% sure what that meant.
Yeah, thank you for that. I forget a lot of times. We get so stuck in our alphabet soup at all of our institutions that we forget that not everybody understands what the acronym stands.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
We also have a grant program that pays for a couple of our embedded tutors. Doesn't give us a whole lot of money, but it does help us pay for some of it. Hopefully, maybe we can look into in the future getting some more grant funds for that. But so far, that's pretty much where we stand as far as how we can pay for our tutors. All right. So along the way, we've developed some best practices for managing our program, and we will start getting into that because that's really what you guys are here to listen to, not me ramble on about our history. So let's get to that. So as we mentioned earlier, consistent training is really imperative to try and make your program work as best as it can. So first up, we'll talk about our training for our tutor program. If you haven't yet, you should try and standardize as much as you can your onboarding process. We've created a checklist for our onboarding process for consistency, so we're not forgetting anything because we have quite a few components that we try and include in there. We've also, one of my coworkers has created a handbook with all of our policies and procedures for our tutors that we follow, for them to follow and make sure that they are staying consistent and working through that. We usually try and go through this with our tutors one-on-one to make sure that they have the opportunity to ask questions and they can actually interact with the content as they go instead of just having to read it on the page. I don't know about everybody else, but for me, just reading it on the page doesn't always help me to actually comprehend or understand what we're talking about. So we've also found it very useful to evaluate their understanding of the material that we've gone through with some sort of small quiz in our Learning Center Management program. It forces them to recall and remember what it was that we had gone over, and it hits on the important topics to help make sure that we put that information into their long-term memory bank. We usually do that on one day, and then we'll have the tutors come back and we'll talk to them another day about embedded tutoring. We don't want to overwhelm them with too much information all at once, but we do want to make sure that we emphasize the specifics about how it's different with the embedded tutoring program. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually switch over and show you guys a little bit of our embedded tutoring program right now.
So while you're doing that, I just want to mention that because we've been getting, we got a question about this, that the materials that you're mentioning, we actually do have those available. If folks go to the materials tab, right next to the questions tab, we do have those available. We have the best practices PDF, the agreement form, and the observation that Seana has provided to us that you can download, and we will also make those available to anyone who watches the recording later. We'll send that out and make it available on our YouTube page as well.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the learning system that we use. We use D2L or Brightspace. And we created this shell to make sure that the tutors had a place where they could go back and actually find the information if they needed a refresher for any reason. But we put in here any information that we thought was important for them to know. So it starts out a little bit of information about why do we do embedded tutoring and what is embedded tutoring really. Talks about the difference between an embedded tutor and a tutoring assistant, a teaching assistant, so that way they understand what their role is and what it's going to be and not be. Because we want them to be able to identify if somebody is asking them something that isn't really part of their job. The next part that we really want to emphasize is the expectation of each one of the stakeholders. So our stakeholders being the tutor, the instructor, and the learning center manager. It's important for the tutors to really know and what we are expecting of them, but also what we are not expecting of them. And that will help them to understand when they are being asked to do something, if it is something that they should be doing or not doing. We also take a little bit of that time to talk to them about how to respond when something is asked of them that isn't part of their job, to make sure that they feel comfortable being able to say the word no and feel empowered to be able to say, no, that's not part of my job, and bring it back to us if they have any questions about it. We also want to make sure that they know what each stakeholder's job is in the program, to make sure that they know who's responsible for what, and if they have questions about anything specifically, what it is, who it is that they would go to in that situation. We also talk to our tutors a little bit about what relationships and boundaries are in the classroom, and how to make sure that they keep a good, healthy boundary with the students to make sure that they are not feeling overwhelmed. Most of us know that our tutors are very helpful individuals, and they wouldn't want to do this job if they weren't, but they also have a hard time being able to say the word no to somebody if they ask a question. And so we try to empower our tutors and give them specifics on how to maintain a certain level of boundary to make sure that they don't feel obligated to answer questions at any point in time when they're not on the clock. We also go over with them active learning activities. We want them to know what it is that they're going to be going into in the classroom. So we give them a little bit of different ideas as to what they might be seeing when they go into the classroom and what we really mean by active learning. We also discuss best practices with them. And those we have gotten over time through our embedded tutors that have completed the programs. We ask them at the end of every semester what they would want to pass along to new embedded tutors, or what they wish they would have known ahead of time before they became an embedded tutor. So we've compiled a lot of that into this program. We've also talked to the instructors about best practices too, so all of that information is in here. And we give some specific examples of what the tutors have gone through in the previous classes that have already been completed. And then again at the end, once we've gone through everything, we do a knowledge check on them just to make sure that they are understanding what we are asking of them, that they have a good understanding of what the program is, and help make sure that that information is put into their long-term memory bank again. For us, we also do CRLA training. Not everybody does CRLA training, and that's perfectly fine. But that is how we train our tutors and make sure that they are doing best practices when they are tutoring and getting as much information about how they can work as a tutor as possible. So if you're not doing CRLA training, make sure that you are doing some sort of consistent training with them on how they should be asking questions, how they should be scaffolding with the students, do some role modeling and role playing with them to make sure that they understand what their job and what their role is, to make sure they are ready to go. That is done over time. We don't always do that like as right away, because that would just be way too much information for them to take in or understand until they've actually gone into it a little bit. So we do try and spread that out, but we try and get the most important information that they need to know up front.
Just a quick note about CRLA, because I had a couple folks ask about that. So CRLA is the College Reading and Learning Association. I send out a link if people want to know more. It is a professional organization and one of the certifying boards for tutors if you are interested in certifying tutors, so that they have some sort of standing in the community.
Yeah, it's an international program, and it certifies 3 different levels, and our program has been certified in all 3 of them. So we are lucky enough to get that. So we feel like they get a pretty decent training out of all of that. All right, so once we get done with the tutors, we definitely found out that we needed to train our instructors. And instead of just calling it a training program, we called it a certification program, just to try and emphasize it a little more with the instructors and make it put more importance to it. We wanted the instructors to stop and really focus on the program and not just have to send them information to read, because a lot of times, I know I do this, when you get something with a whole lot of words on the page, you tend to gloss over it and you don't always necessarily get the information that you need to get out of it. So what we have done is we've made it a live and interactive training for our instructors, where so that they just can't dismiss the information that they really work with the material, and they engage in conversation, and they're actually manipulating things on the screen while we are doing it. We do ours virtually, so it does give them the opportunity to do it from anywhere, and we don't force them to have to come onto campus. We also try to lead by example. If we're asking them to do active learning, we try and do it ourselves in the class, in the workshop, so that way they can kind of get a little taste of what we're asking them to do. We do try and limit the length of this program, though, because you don't want to make it too long so that their willingness to actually try and attend wanes, and then they're not going to want to come. But you want to make sure that you have enough time to get through the important information without losing their attention. Similar to the tutors, we go through the expectation of each stakeholder, what is important for them to know and what we expect of them, and what is and is not the job expectations of the tutors, to try and alleviate some of the issues that we were having with the tutors being required to or asked to do teaching assistant work. Some of those things that we were getting asked about were like having the tutors helping with taking attendance in class, or maybe running to go get copies of something. We make sure that our tutors are not involved at all in creation of any of the materials, that they are really there. While we say it is a program to really help the instructors, it's really mostly there to help the students. We want to make sure that the tutor is there to help the students in the classroom, not really helping the instructor. We do talk a little bit about active learning, so that way if there are instructors in the training that don't know what active learning is, that they get a little bit of information on what it is, and then they can go back and research it more on their own. But we want to make sure that they have a little bit of understanding as to what we are expecting them to do with the tutors in the classrooms. We discuss best practices during our trainings, and we have the group talk about what they envision their tutors doing in the classroom. And we also bring in some of the material from what our instructors have done in the past through the best practices that we've received from them. Part of the training, we talk about how to find a tutor for their class. We have learned over time that the best tutors for embedded tutoring come from previous courses with the instructor. That helps to already have that relationship already built between the student and the instructor. The student knows what to expect of the instructor, what they're asking for, what they're looking for. They were successful in their class. It also helps because the instructor feels comfortable with the student. They really understand where their background is in the material, how comfortable they are with them knowing the material and being able to pass that along to the students. If they don't get that, we also talk about embedded tutor being somebody that has been previously in a different class because they know what to expect. That really helps, but it's not necessary. We bring tutors on brand new that go into classes and they do well. It's just really is a matter about the training for them. But these are best practices that we try and present to the instructors, that these are things that we have seen work as well as possible. The tutors for embedded tutoring really do have to be outgoing and willing to start conversations. The more that they can relate to the students and start and engage in those conversations, the better off it's going to be. And then students are then going to feel more comfortable coming back and asking questions of the tutors rather than feeling scared and not wanting to like approach somebody that they don't really know. The other important part is that the tutors have to have the availability to be able to be in the class. If they don't have that availability, then that kind of kills the deal right there. We also go over program requirements. Like we mentioned earlier, we do an embedded tutor agreement form for all of our classes before the semester begins. We also do in-class observations and the surveys. So we give them a little bit of upfront information about those, what to expect, what they look like. We do give them copies of each of these in their training shell, so that way they can go back and look at it. And we try to alleviate any fears that they might have with those observations, that we are trying to tell them how to do their job, or that we are going to impact their job somehow if we see something that we don't like. The observation really is about the students and the interactions with the tutors, how the tutors are interacting, things like that. And again, at the end, just like we've been talking about, I feel like a broken record. We evaluate what they know. We give them a quick quiz to make sure that they understand the important topics. And then we also ask them to write a reflection to us about how they see themselves utilizing the embedded tutor in the classroom. It doesn't have to be very long. I think we only ask for like 250 words. So it's not really a super long reflection assignment, and they can get it done rather quickly. But this gives us a little bit better understanding if they really understand how to use that tutor in their classroom. And if we see anything that might be concerning, then that gives us the opportunity to go back and try and clarify that more one-on-one with that instructor. We also give them a deadline because everybody gets busy. So if you don't have deadlines, we tend to push things off later and later, and then it never gets done. So we usually give them about a week to get everything done, just so that way it stays important and fresh in their minds, and then they're able to get it done quickly. The next one, I feel silly saying this, but communication really is a big key to being successful in an embedded tutoring program. This kind of shows you the fun little like love triangle, as I call it, between the three different pieces that work for this program. Without the communication working between all three of these pieces, the program is going to suffer. The instructor and the manager need to meet at least a minimum of 2 times a semester, or connect 2 times a semester at minimum, but we usually try and meet with them more frequently than that, at least once a semester, just to check in, make sure there's no issues going on. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable and that they're feeling heard, and if they have any questions, being available to answer those questions for them. This doesn't have to be like a set meeting to talk. It could be a quick email. It could be office, popping in when they're doing office hours in your center or in their office. It could be a quick Google Meet session if they wanted to do something like that, or you could stop by their classroom as they're getting out of class. But that piece is important to make sure that that instructor and manager are continuing to talk. The instructor is really the person that is in the classroom with our staff member. And if the staff member is not attending class, we're not going to know that without the instructor letting us know. So there are certain pieces that we're hoping they want to communicate with us. So if they don't feel comfortable with us, we may find or miss that our tutors aren't doing their job as well as they need to, and we're not able to correct that situation. So that piece of communication is really important. The manager to the tutor, just like any supervisor staff relationship, you got to check in with your staff and make sure that things are going well, answering any questions that they have, reinforcing and clarifying what their scope of work is, making sure that they don't feel like they are being asked to do anything outside of the realm of their job responsibilities, and letting them know if there is something going on like that, that you will be reaching out to the instructor and helping to clear that up so that it's not happening again. So like I was saying, the manager and tutor really need to make sure that they communicate just as any regular staff and supervisor do, meeting them, because embedded tutoring is more of a independent work. We don't always see them during their regular hours, and so we need to make sure that they are communicating with us if they have any questions, and making sure that they are getting the information from us, and that that communication is continuing to flow between us. Email is very important between embedded tutors and their managers, because a lot of times if you're not seeing them, email is the best way to try and get them information, and making sure that they are responding, that they've gotten that information is important. And lastly, the tutor needs to talk to the instructor. They should be talking pretty frequently about what's coming up in the class, what they need to be prepared for, if there's anything specific that they want them to do differently in the class for that day or the next week. They could be giving them a heads up as to what's coming, so that the tutor could prep for it if they need to. This doesn't have to be, again, a specific meeting time. They could just be chatting before or after class via email. But all of this communication is really important. If we're not talking and continuing to have those open lines of communication, breakdown is going to happen, and you're going to have a hard time trying to make sure that the program is as successful as it could be. We also want to make sure that our communication with the students is there. So what we do to try and make sure that our tutor information is as readily available to the students as possible, we put like a little digital business card into the learning management system shell for the class at the beginning of each semester. It gives the tutor's name. It does give the email, which we don't normally do with our tutors, but for the embedded tutor program, for the students to have as many different venues to be able to connect with the tutors, we do give them their email address. We just make sure that the tutors understand that they don't have to answer those emails if they are off the clock, because they shouldn't be having to answer emails when they come through at 3 in the morning if that happens. It gives a picture of the tutor, so that way they've got a reference point if they need it, if they're fuzzy, especially at the beginning of the semester, as to who the tutor is. Gives them a little reference point as to who they are. And then it also gives where their open tutoring hours are outside of class, that they can meet with, and what times that they're at. So that way, if they want to connect up with them outside of class, they know when that is. And then if they have any regular hours in Learning Center, we usually provide that as well. So that way they've got additional time frames that they can meet if they can't make the open tutoring hours that are specific for the class. We do make sure if things change that we get this updated as soon as possible. Every once in a while schedules change, or we find that the open hours aren't working for the class, and so we try and adjust those to make sure that those are working well for all parties. Earlier I referenced a couple times our embedded tutor agreement form. This is something we made a few years ago. as a way we were trying to figure out after we started our certification program. We're like, well, we need to make sure that we are continuing to refresh the information with the instructors. What's the best way to kind of go about doing that? Do we want to force them to have to come back and sit through all of the material again? We didn't think that that was probably a best use of their time or ours unless we had a lot of new information that we wanted to present to them. So we came up with this agreement form that we have them go through and we fill out before the semester begins each time. The document lays out specifics for each stakeholder. So the beginning section, I know it's a little hard to read on here, but there is a PDF in the supplements for the webinar if you need it. The beginning section talks about what the instructor is agreeing to, and then there's a piece about what the embedded tutor is agreeing to, and then all the way at the bottom we also have an important piece about what we as the manager of the program is agreeing to and committing to make sure that everybody kind of gets a little bit of a refresher on what those key important pieces are. Since they're signing it, it puts emphasis, and you usually when you're signing something, you tend to read through it just to make sure that you know what you're signing. And we want to make sure that they see the importance of that. So this was the way that we decided, instead of making them do another training, that we would go through each semester. We try and set time aside as we can for all three of us to sit down and go through this agreement form each semester to make sure that we actually spend time with the material again and take a few minutes to refresh. But I know that's not always possible, especially with all the craziness at the beginning of the semester. So if you can't, make sure that at least the tutor and the instructor are connecting and discussing it. There are a few pieces on here that we ask them to fill out. In the instructor section, we ask how they're going to encourage the students to utilize the tutor throughout the semester. So they'll fill that piece out. And then in the embedded tutor section, we do put in there the tutor will be attending class this many times a week. And this is kind of what their role and activities are going to be in the classroom. And if they've decided anything outside of the classroom, some review sessions, things like that, they'll fill all of that in. Just so that way we've got a little bit of a good idea of what's happening before the semester starts. And then if things start to get off track a little bit during the semester, we can reference this and use that as a communication tool just to try and get everybody back on track of like, this is what we agreed to at the beginning of the semester. Can we make sure that we adhere to that? The next one that I've also referenced earlier is that we started doing in-class observations. Just like with any tutor, it's ideal to observe them in their job to make sure that they are being effective and providing them with feedback to help them further themselves in their tutoring abilities. We do it at least once per semester. This really helps to give them some feedback. If they are a brand new tutor, we try and do it at least twice a semester. Once they're a couple weeks in, and then once a little bit further into the semester, just so that we can give them that timely feedback and we can try and correct anything that we might see that needs to be corrected. You also want to emphasize that the focus of these observations when you're talking to the instructor is on the tutor, it's not on the instructor. Some of the things that we tend to look at are like, how are the students and tutors connecting? How well is the tutor being utilized? Are there any opportunities for improvements that we could try and suggest to the instructor? Maybe we see some other areas where they might be able to utilize the tutor a little bit more. We can suggest those. They can take it, they cannot take it. And are there any issues that need to be addressed? So if we're seeing that there's a little bit of disconnect, we can start those conversations up with the tutor and with the instructor and try and see if we can't figure those out. There is a copy of this as well in all of the PDFs that you were given today. Our program really wants to make sure that we get a lot of feedback from everybody. Qualitative data is important because quantitative data doesn't always tell you the whole story, especially when it is as intricate as embedded tutoring. looking at success rates isn't always going to tell you the entire story, because while it may not show that the success rate is high, it might still be a big improvement from where it was in the past. And so even though it's not what most people classify as a success, either an A or B or a C, if we have moved the needle from either a withdrawal to completing the course, or an F to a D, I still consider that as a successful program, because we are moving that needle in the right direction, and hopefully we will continue to improve that and go from a D to an actual success, what we classify as a success rate. So when we look at feedback, we get feedback from the students. Some of the stuff that we'll ask the students on our program at the end, we typically do it towards the end of the semester. Have they utilized the tutor in the class or outside of the class? Have they positively impacted the students' success? Do they feel like the tutor has positively impacted their success in the class? When do you think that the embedded tutor is most useful to you, inside, outside of the class, somewhere else, through email, any of the different ways that we allow them to reach out? Would you have sought a tutor's help if there wasn't an embedded tutor in the class? Will you continue to utilize tutors in the future now that you've had the embedded tutor? And how can we improve the program? We really emphasize continuous development at our institution, and so we are continuously looking at our program and trying to find better ways to do things if there are opportunities. We survey the tutors every semester. What's their favorite part? What's their least favorite part of being an embedded tutor? What it would have been helpful to know before getting into the class? What can we, from their point of view, how can we improve the program? Do they have any thoughts that they can pass along to new embedded tutors? Because we want to make sure that we can continue that chain of connection from our old embedded tutors to our new embedded tutors, and help them be more successful using the information from our previous tutors. And we usually ask them a little bit of information about how it was working with the instructor for the class. Were they communicating? Did they ask for specific assignments that connected the students with you? Those kind of things. And then lastly, we talk to the instructors. We get feedback from them as well. Ask them how their experience was using the program. How did they utilize the tutors? What worked well? What didn't work well? Do they think that the embedded tutor was effective? Everybody's perspective is going to be different. So while the tutor might find that they were effective, maybe the instructor didn't see the effectiveness, or maybe the students didn't see that effectiveness. And then any other questions that you want to ask the instructor about the tutor-student interactions. We also try to collect as much data as we can quantitatively. Try and quantify how many students we are helping in the classroom, and which students those are, so that way we can use that to kind of really delve into more of the minutia of the details, and see if the students that are getting help really are doing better than the students that aren't really utilizing the tutors in the classroom, rather than just assuming that all of the students are working with the tutor in the class. This helps us to be able to provide proof to our administration that our tutors are being utilized, because if not, the only other data points that we have is whether or not students are coming to see our tutors outside of the classroom. And sometimes we have tutors that are super busy inside the classroom, and then nobody comes to see them outside of the classroom, or vice versa. And so we want to make sure that we are showing as much information as possible that our tutors really are being utilized in this program, and that the time and the money and the effort that we are putting into it is going somewhere. Depending on the level of detail that you have, you can work with your institution's research department, if you have one, and really help get into that more like nitpicky data, to see if the program is helping reach, things like specific target populations, underserved population, first generation, college goers, low socioeconomic status, and it can help you to provide information on whether or not you are meeting your program goals, your unit goals, or even the college goals, depending on which ones are tutoring is incorporated in. Just so you guys can kind of see the numbers from our program. This is information that we have gathered through our institution's research department. This first one shows our persistence rates using our embedded tutoring program for the last couple of years. As you can see in that first column, those that persisted through our college, so fall to spring, was at a much higher rate than those that did not have an embedded tutor that did not utilize the embedded tutor. So we are, between 5 and 10% differences in most of these, sometimes a little bit more. So to me, it looks like the embedded tutors are actually really helping the students stay in the class and complete that class, as opposed to those that don't have the embedded tutors. Retention rates, so fall to fall, are they coming back from one year to the next? Our retention rates are not necessarily the best. I don't think anybody's are right now. But you can still see that there is an improvement for those that have utilized the embedded tutors versus those that have not used the embedded tutors. There still is a higher percentage of people being retained from one fall to the next. And lastly, we talked about those success rates. So when we talk about success rates, we talk about students that completed with an A, a B, or a C. In this, you can see it's actually got a little bit of variation. Most of these will show that those that utilize the embedded tutors had a higher success rate than those that didn't. There is one exception in there. In fall of 2023, we actually showed a decrease. But it's not to say you should be discouraged if you see there are semesters when the data doesn't show what you're hoping for. When, like what we had talked earlier about, we can still show that we are improving even if we are not moving the needle from a DFW grade to an ABC grade. But if we're moving from a D to an F to a D, or somebody not withdrawing because there is an embedded tutor in the class, to me, that still shows an improvement, and that still is successful to me. So when you do see those rates maybe aren't what you're looking for, make sure that you dive a little bit deeper and see what's going on, and making sure that you're still seeing that you are making the impact that you're looking for. And that's where the qualitative data is really helpful to see what the students are what the students have said about those classes, where maybe the success rates weren't as high. You can go back and look at the qualitative data to see if the students felt that the embedded tutor really helped them to succeed, or that they wouldn't have done as well in that class prior to them being in there. It also could depend on the difficulty of the course. We do a lot with some of our higher level classes now. And so some of those already have interesting success rates, and putting an embedded tutor may not fluctuate those as much as possible. And when that happens, we take a look and we talk about whether or not that is a class that we want to continue doing an embedded tutor in, or if maybe we want to try and push those tutors to courses where they're more needed and could make a bigger impact. Last little thing, we're getting to the end here. As part of the embedded tutor program, the biggest lesson that I've learned is we've got to be flexible with this program. It's not set in stone. It is still something that is new to what we do as a practice. And so be flexible, listen to new ideas. There's always new tutors, new instructors. They all have ideas. Don't be afraid to listen to them and to try new things. You're not going to know if it's going to work unless you actually try it out. I had one tutor a couple of years ago. I am not a big proponent of sharing out our tutors' personal information just so that we can protect them a little bit more. But I had one tutor that was very adamant that she just did not want to, she's not great at emailing. She didn't want to use email. She wanted to give tutors her phone number and allow the students to have her phone number so that they could reach out to her that way if they needed something. I was really skeptical about it, but she was really gung-ho about this. And so I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. If it's not working, if they're bothering you too much, you know, we would shut it down and we would do something else with it. I still didn't want her to use her phone number, so we ended up setting up a Google phone number, which she could turn on and off at any point in time, which allowed her to have that like barrier and cutoff from work. So when she was off the clock, she didn't feel like she had to look at it all the time. And we talked about those boundaries and making sure that she was only responding during her work hours and that she wasn't allowing the students to kind of push those boundaries aside. In the end, it was funny. She said that she had set up, it was for a chemistry class, and so she set up little chats between all of the lab groups. And the lab students would start asking her questions in the chats. And when she would get onto the chats, she would find that the classmates actually ended up answering the questions for them before she could even get to the question to be able to answer it. I see that as a total success because they're utilizing their resources and the students are learning how to use each other as opposed to needing that tutor, and they were able to get that information and work with their classmates. So I thought it was really cool. I didn't think that would have been the outcome for it, but it was something new. We tried it, and had she continued on, we would have continued doing it. One thing that we haven't really talked about here is what happens if an embedded tutor situation isn't working out. What if an instructor is asking something of the tutor that even though we've talked about it, they're still continuing to ask of them, and that it's not something that is required of them as a job expectation, or maybe the tutor isn't doing their job, they're not attending class for whatever reason, or they're giving wrong information out, and whatever it is in the situation is not working. You can't be afraid to pull the tutor from the class if you really, really have to. If the situation is not working, it's not working. Everybody in the situation is going to feel it. If the tutor and the instructor are not in a good working relationship and have that good working relationship, the students are going to feel it. They're going to feel something is off, and it's not going to work out for them, and it's not going to be the best situation for your staff or for the instructor. We want to make sure that we are always taking everybody's well-being into account, and when we are doing that, you know, if it's not working out, it's stressing the tutor out or it's stressing the instructor out, and it's not a good relationship, so it's not worth trying to keep them in that situation. You can always try and find somebody else to replace them with, or sometimes it's just a matter of that course isn't going to have the tutor for the remainder of it, and that's okay. It's not saying anything bad about the tutor. It's not saying anything bad about the instructor. Just sometimes those connections, they get missed. You want to adjust for what works for your college too. Ours, like I said, even though we have a large asynchronous set of courses, we have never found a great way where our tutors can actually interact and do active learning with students in asynchronous courses. And so we have decided not to do asynchronous tutors or embedded tutors in asynchronous courses. My apologies, getting tired. But what works for us may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for us. I know plenty of other institutions that have found ways that they can implement tutors into their asynchronous courses. And so do what works for your classes. Figure out what your instructors are looking for, how they want to utilize the tutors, and make it work for your program. Adjust based on their needs. The beauty of embedded tutoring is that there's not one specific way that you have to do. That was one thing that we really liked about the embedded tutoring versus like supplemental instruction or things like that. Be ready to make changes as needs arise, just like everything else in our lives. Changes come at a moment's notice, and sometimes you have to adjust and be ready for those. So being flexible is definitely necessary. work within your budget. Make sure you're able to manage your program with your budget. Sometimes you might have to say no based on what your priorities are for the college. You can go and talk to other departments if you don't have the budget. See if they might be able to help you fund some of their courses, or look for opportunities to build in funding from grants. We're going to be looking more into that into the future for our institution as we continue to grow. And make sure that you're not overextending yourself or your staffing levels. If you do that, things are going to start getting missed. Program is not going to run as effectively and as efficiently as it can, and you want to make sure that you are staying within your means. And my last little thing is I just want to remind everybody, student success and engagement is the goal of embedded tutoring. So whatever it is that works within your program to make that happen is what you should do for your program. And with that, I am done, and I would love to answer any questions you guys might have.
And we have a lot of them, so this is it's very exciting. I'm going back to, we're going to answer as many as we can. So let me start with this one. The question is, can tutors be embedded in asynchronous courses?
It really depends on what you feel the need is. I would really consider working with your instructor that's requesting it if it's an asynchronous class, asking them how they feel like you can really embed a tutor within an asynchronous course, what it is that you would be having them do. If part of your definition of embedded tutoring is working actively within the class, how can the tutor engage and actively work with the students in that class? Is that something that is, is that effective for you? Do you feel like that is something that is going to be an effective use for your tutors? If you've never done it before, try it out, see what happens. And if you don't find that the tutor is really being utilized much, look at it and review and take a look at your statistics and your data, see if it was something that you want to continue doing or not.
Great. And the next question is, do individual tutors embed in more than one course?
Yeah, I have, I think last semester I had a tutor in 3 classes. It really just depends on how long the class is, because they tend to be a little bit on the lengthy side depending on what course it is, like especially some of the lab classes. If you've got 6 or 7 hours just in class a week, kind of limits how much you can do. It really depends on, we allow our tutors to work up to 19 and a half hours, so we try and make whatever fits within their schedule, and we make sure that they understand what is being asked of them and what they feel like they are capable of doing. So if they have a full load of classes, and I'm probably not going to give them 3 classes, but at least giving them one is something that is definitely doable. The one that was in 3 classes was not actually taking any classes for the semester, so that's why it was a little bit easier for us to be able to put somebody in multiple classes.
Gotcha. And just a quick comment, we talked earlier about what CRN stands for, course registration number. I had said that typically it's the identifying number for the course, and then there's a section number. But it does sound like some schools are doing it differently. Some schools are listing it as the section number. So I think there's a little bit of variation, but the big thing to take away, just for anyone wondering, CRN is basically just an identifier for the course. So I just wanted to mention that it's not I don't think it's a one size fits all for all schools. Okay, and the onboarding checklist, is that, somebody was asking about that. I believe that is one of the, is that one of the documents that you've already shared?
That is not one of the documents I
Okay.
shared. We are in the midst of revising it. So that was the only reason why I did not share that one at this point.
Okay. Okay.
But it really just depends on what what you guys go through. If you just take a look and sit down while you're onboarding a new tutor, write down all of the steps that you're doing, what's the important pieces that you want to make sure that they get, and make sure, if there's things that your institution requires, that you get those in there as well. Um, and I like to be more detailed than not, so mine probably also has a lot more detail in it than most people would need.
Same,
Um,
same. All right, and then our next question is, which college classes are you having problems with when it comes to finding tutors?
Problems, usually it's like some of the, it depends on my tutors for the semester. Sometimes we are lacking in some of the higher level math tutors that can do the real high levels. And if I've got tutors, or if I've got instructors asking for tutors for those classes, because it is such a high level, a lot of those tutors tend to move on to four-year institutions pretty quickly from us. So those tend to be ones that I find hard time with. Um, Chemistry is also another one I think that I've been struggling with a little bit, trying to find some tutors with it. Um, for Learning Center and embedded tutoring in general. Usually, I haven't had as many problems finding embedded tutors because a lot of times we really emphasize with the instructors that the best embedded tutor for the program is to try and find somebody that they've had in their classes previously. Um, if not, we try and find somebody within our program that already has taken that class or maybe has already been an embedded tutor in that course before. Um, and if not, then we just try and find what we can as we are hiring to see what we can, if we can fill those courses.
And then another question, any tips for getting faculty involved or excited about embedded tutoring?
Um, Talk to them one-on-one. Bring a faculty member along that actually is a proponent for the program, that utilizes the tutors every day, and let them kind of talk to them one-on-one about how they have seen the success of their students change with the embedded tutors and how the tutor has helped to improve their classroom. They can give them tips and ideas on how to flip their classroom so that they do more active learning activities in the classroom. A lot of times that tends to be the struggle, is that the instructors don't really, they can't see the vision as to how to switch their classroom to a more active learning environment. And so that is where we've seen a lot of the holdup. So trying to bring those instructors in that can show strategies and ideas on how to change that.
And then another question about materials. Sandra wants to know, she saw the best practices for managing a program, is wondering if you are able to share best practices that are shared with the tutors.
Yeah, I can probably send that to you, and if you can send it out to the list.
Absolutely, I can do that. We can make that available. All right. Here we go. And then this question goes back to slide 17, and it's, what do you measure for success?
Um, we typically start with those big three that I had posted our statistics on. Are we helping the persistence and the retention rates of our students? Are we helping them be successful, which means having an A, B, or a C in the class? So what we want to see is we want to see less students withdrawing from the classes that have our embedded tutors in them. We want to use that qualitative data that we get from our surveys to see if the students feel like the embedded tutor has made a difference and help them be more successful in their class. Um, because we don't get to really follow that student from class to class. We don't know what they were like beforehand. We don't know how working with the tutor has really helped them or not. So we utilize that kind of information. Does the instructor feel like it's made a difference in their class overall? Because the instructor really knows, if they've taught that class a few times, like, oh, my students were really struggling in this section, but now that there's that embedded tutor, the embedded tutor's been able to help them a lot more with understanding that material, and the students are succeeding in their understanding that material a lot more. So that's how we define how successful we are with our students in the embedded program.
Awesome. And this next question is, how long is the faculty training?
Our faculty training is between an hour and a half and 2 hours. Kind of depends on who's talking. Sometimes people talk a little bit faster. Sometimes people talk a little more thoroughly and take a little bit longer. And it really depends on how many instructors are in the workshop too. If there's only 2 or 3, it tends to go a little bit faster. If you've got 10 or 12 people, they can talk a little bit longer. They have more stories to tell, so it takes a little bit longer for them to get through the system.
Okay. Next question: are your instructors compensated in any way for participating in the program and or attending the training?
Our instructors currently are not, which is why we try and really make sure that we limit how long our workshop is. We tell them, if anybody asks about it, we tell them to go back to their division and talk to their division about getting paid for the development, the continuing education units for it. But as far as having the embedded tutor in the class, they don't get paid any extra for doing that. It's all something that they do on their own time. And it's something that it's very minimal, really, what they have to do once they get into the program. There's not a lot, like they don't have to prep anything differently if they're already using the active learning. It's just a matter of that communication, talking back and forth with everybody.
Yeah. And then next question: what are some of the active learning strategies you go over with the tutors and the instructors?
We really emphasize and go over flipped classrooms quite a bit, because a lot of our instructors will have the students kind of read through material before class, and then they come into the class and work in groups on whiteboards, just answering problems over and over again, especially in our math classes. So they work in small groups or in individuals, and the tutors will kind of walk around to the different groups and make sure that they're being able to answer the questions, or if they're struggling, that they can work with that person to understand the materials. I also point out to my tutors, like, if you see somebody being quiet and off to the side, and try and engage them in that conversation with their group, and ask them to make sure that they have a good understanding of it, and that they're not just kind of like staying shy off to the side, not understanding it, because we want to make sure that all of the students are really getting the help that they need.
Yeah. And this is a good one. How do you get the instructor? They're all good questions. I haven't seen this many questions in a long time. How do you get the instructors to join the training? The tutors have to join because it's their job. We usually have, this person says, we usually have a hard time getting even an email response from some of the instructors.
Yeah, it's a struggle. Honestly, it's really the emphasizing what the program can do for your class and for your students, and finding the instructors that want to provide that extra support for their students in the classroom. Um, we typically tend to get the same instructors semester after semester that want it, and then every once in a while we've got new ones that come on board, and then they really appreciate it, and then they stick around. So it's a long game.
Yeah,
There really is
sounds
no
familiar.
trick to it, other than just getting the information out there about how helpful it is to the students, providing, if you've got data showing that it's successful, showing that to them and telling them how it can really help and affect your students.
Yeah. And then if you could talk a little bit more about what is the role of the instructor in the embedded tutoring equation. I know that's a little abstract, but if you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So when we talk to the instructors about what their role is, we want to make sure that they understand that they are not the supervisor of the tutor. We are the supervisor, so they don't really have to worry about doing any of the disciplinary work. They don't have to worry about timesheets. They don't have to worry about, making sure that they're doing all of those regular employee things that they're doing. The instructor, what we require and ask of them is that they help relay help tell the tutors what's going on in the class, what's coming up, that they have that communication with them. They share any of the technology that the students are using. If they are using a specific program and they need access to it, the instructors are required to help them get that access to it. We don't. If they need to use technology, we ask that they do the training on that piece. We can do certain things like Google and how to use our program specific to the college. But if you ask us to know how to use 20 different programs on how to do math, we're not going to be able to do that. The best person to do that is really the instructor and what they're looking for. Um, and we ask that they like let us know you are our eyes and ears when you're there. If the tutor's doing something that you're not happy about, we don't ask that you approach them, but let us know what's going on so that way we can go back and have that conversation with our staff members. Um, the we also have a little conversation about mentoring the tutors. We don't require it of the instructors, but a lot of times the students, they might kind of create that relationship with the tutor where they feel like they are a little bit of a mentor. And if they have the capacity to act as that mentor for the for the tutors, we encourage them to do that. But we tell them, like, if it's not something that is in your capacity, you don't have to do it. But a lot of times it just kind of come naturally with their communication and their conversations about the class.
And that leads actually really well into this next question, which was submitted by someone else, but it came right after. How do you deal with instructors using or trying to use the embedded tutors as teaching assistants?
We have those tough conversations with them. We let them know that, like, we've talked about this is why we have the training ahead of time and why we ask them to sign those embedded tutor agreement forms. So if we find that they're doing something that we don't believe is part of their job expectations, we have those hard conversations with them and we tell them, like, you can't use, I think one time we had an instructor that was trying to use our tutor in their absence as an instructor. Our tutors don't get paid as an instructor. Our tutors are not they're not meant to take role and be a replacement for you. And so we ended up actually having to take that tutor out of the class after a couple. The instructor had a baby and was trying to use the tutor as the replacement while they were away. So it didn't work out very well. Had another one that's like asked them to kind of like do a quick check of homework assignments, and we're like, no, that's not really something that's within their purview. We really want to delineate and make that differentiation between what the instructor is and what the tutor is, because you really want it to be that peer-to-peer role and feel like they are talking to somebody that has no bearing or no say in what their grades are for the class.
Yeah. That's actually, I saw a debate in the LearnNest listserv recently about that, about having tutors who are also like have some influence over grades and the conflicts of interest there. So that's a really that's a more common conversation than I would have expected. Yeah, and if your tutors are anything like the tutors I've supervised in the past, they, they're usually pretty young. They don't know they don't want to say no. They want to make a good impression. They want to make the teachers happy. We didn't do embedded tutors, but I would have expected this to be an issue if we had done that as well.
Once we started doing the consistent training, we really did minimize those kind of situations happening. So that's why, it's one of our best practices that we really try and do a consistent training with all of the staff, with all of the instructors, and then that embedded tutor agreement form to really reinforce those behaviors.
Yep. Awesome. And our next question is, what's the difference between open tutoring and drop-in tutoring?
Good question. Our drop-in tutoring is what we consider our learning center. We don't do appointment-based in our learning centers. We do all drop-in tutoring where students can just come in at will when they have a question and get help with our tutors. Our open tutoring hours are for each one of our embedded tutors. We give them 2 hours outside of class to do specific tutoring just for that class. We had initially actually called it office hours to try to mimic what the instructor had, but then we found out that a lot of the students were a little hesitant to come to office hours because there's that stigma that it is like that it has to do with higher power dynamics and things like that. Yeah. So we changed it to just calling it the open tutoring hours for the class.
Here's a question I really relate to. I have a question about timing/planning of the semester. How early do you start planning which tutor is working in which classes? I feel like it's always a really quick turnaround because we are waiting for tutors to finalize their schedules, including their own classes. That gives me flashbacks to scheduling peer tutors and having to make a million changes after the first week because suddenly they dropped a class, they added a class, and you know, just kind of shuffling things around there.
Yeah, for sure. We try to like start before the end of the prior semester asking instructors for their requests for embedded tutors, even before we start asking the tutors for their own schedules. Um, because we don't actually place tutors into classes until we have that instructor request. So that is really the first line that we have to do. And our starting point is getting those requests from the instructors. And then once we get that, I communicate pretty closely with my tutors, asking them if they've already talked to them. Do they have the availability? Is that something that they're interested in? And talk to them frankly about like, it may not happen if I don't have enough availability or enough budget to cover all of these classes. It might not happen if the class gets canceled, or if there's not enough students in it, or I have to decide between one or another class. I'm going to look at a bunch of different things to decide which one I'm gonna be able to put an embedded tutor in. And then I usually try and get them a schedule more definitive at least 2 weeks before the semester starts. It really just depends on like when does your institution do like drop deadlines for when the classes are is the class actually going to roll or not. A lot of our classes luckily have pretty high counts for the ones that have embedded tutors in them. There's only usually one or two that end up not running if we have that many in a semester. Right now, I've got a couple that I'm kind of watching to see if they actually are going to run. And I've had that conversation with the tutors already
Mm-hmm.
to make sure. I try and do it as early as possible, but there's always situations that come up.
And I know we are coming up on the 2:30 mark, 2:30 Eastern, which was when we originally scheduled this to end. We still have a lot of questions. I'm okay to continue, and if you are, Shauna, to answer the questions remaining, but let me know if that's not the case for you. No problem. Um, all right, awesome. So yeah, and for those of you who are staying with us, we appreciate it. Anybody who has to go, of course, we are recording this Q&A. Next question, what do the embedded tutors do exactly in the classroom when class is in session?
That is a tricky question because it really depends on what the instructor is asking them to do. Um, our goal is that the tutors are working with the students as much as possible in the class during class time. However that looks like with the instructor is how it runs. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of our math courses tend to do more of the like we're getting into groups up on the whiteboards around the room. The tutor is going to walk around and help those students. Um, in our lab classes, a lot of times the tutors work with the students mostly during the lab time when they're working with the models or trying to do one of the lab series for chemistry, and they're helping them to answer those questions. Anytime that the instructor gives them a couple minutes to like think about a concept or gives them a prompt to think about that they want them to think about, the tutor can get up and really walk around and talk to the different students and ask them what their thoughts are, have a little bit of back and forth between them. Um, Writing classes, a lot of times it's, working with them during the peer editing time frames or helping them to understand what a thesis is, how are they presenting their paper, how's the organization doing that way. So when they have that free time, they're working with them. In a reading class, it's kind of similar. If they're working on a reading excerpt and answering questions, they're walking around talking to the students, asking them what their responses are, if they're, and using a lot of question asking strategies, using probing questions, not just giving them the answers, but like, well, what do you think about this? There's 4 answers. Can you narrow it down to 2? Well, why do you think it's these 2? Why do you think it's this one? Let's have a conversation about it. Let's bring in your classmate over here. What do they think? And trying to kind of like, we're really more of just the moderator of that conversation sometimes.
All right, and we're getting to as many of these questions as we can. We might need to narrow it down a bit, but next question is, can you give a few examples of what tutors wish they had known before they started tutoring?
That's a hard one because I feel like we are pretty thorough at covering it anymore.
Mhm.
We don't get a lot of those. When we first started, a lot of them wanted more information about what it was that they would be asked to do in the classroom. Would they have access to the class materials? Would they have access to, the homework assignments and things like that that the students are doing? Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't come up with a great answer to
Okay.
that right now. Sorry.
That's okay. Next question, are your embedded tutors expected to attend every class meeting time?
We try and get them to attend as many as they possibly can. We obviously don't expect them to attend when there are tests that are happening or lab exercises where they can't help the students. Usually, when those happen, I try and encourage my tutors, if they are willing to do it, to do like an exam review or a prep beforehand to try and be able to still give them the hours that they're missing so that they get their consistent hours. But also make sure that those students are ready and prepared as much as they can for the class. Um, but we work with the instructors too. We have a couple of classes that are like 4 days a week, and sometimes it's really hard to try and find find a tutor that has the same time frame open all 4 days out of the week. Um, so when that happens, we try and find as many of the days that we can and talk to the instructor. Okay, well, what days do you really need the tutor in there? Are you doing more lecture on this day? If you don't need them on this day, then if it's all lecture, there's not really a point in having the tutor in there necessarily. So we'll keep them out of that class and we'll just put them in these other days of the week. And we have that communication back and forth with the instructor to make sure that they're okay with what days the tutor can be in the class.
Okay. And this one is related to the persistent rates you shared towards the end of the presentation. Are those persistent rates for the whole class or just for students who interacted with the tutor inside or outside of class?
That's for the whole college. Those were the persistence rates for the whole college. So it was those that were in our courses. So very few courses compared to the entirety of what our institution does, but they do have those would be the persistence rates for the classes that had our embedded tutors versus the ones that didn't.
Okay. Next question, do you ever face resistance from the faculty when it comes to the tutor observations in the classroom?
Um, Not really. I think because we kind of like put it out there just at the very beginning. We're like, we want to make sure you feel comfortable with it, that we are not coming in just to talk, just to like observe you. We are really looking at at the program as a whole. Is the tutor doing what they need to do? Can we give them any feedback on how to improve their tutoring within the classroom? But then we're also looking at the program. Are the students interacting with the tutors? Are the tutors being able to be utilized quite frequently in the class or only for a little bit of time? Do we see any other opportunities where we can help them utilize the tutors in another way that maybe they hadn't thought about?
And the next question, how do the staffing and preferences work? For example, does the instructor pick or refer the tutor? Is it first come, first served? Is it DFW or enrollment based? Or if there are fewer available tutors than requested sections?
Luckily, we haven't really run into the problem before where we haven't been able to place a tutor yet. I feel like we are probably running up to that probably fairly soon, and we'll have to figure that out. So right now, we've been doing it based on when the instructor has actually requested, and if we already have a tutor for them, like if they've requested a specific tutor, trying to get those connected up as soon as we can. If it's somebody that's already had the tutor and it was a successful pairing, making sure that we try and do that again if possible, and we're seeing success within that pairing. We look at the DFW rates for some of the classes. If we had to try and pick, that would be probably one of the first things that we would look at would be success rates. If the class that is requesting tutor is already at like an 80 or 90% success rate versus another one that's just requesting it and theirs is at like 60 or 70. Probably going to go with the one that's a little bit lower to try and make sure that we can help out more students, because the other one, students are pretty successful in that class already. And we try to be as like, trying to find the word, open to all of the different courses. It really just depends on what comes up.
We've gotten a request for another list. I can gather these all for you, if whatever you're willing to share. The responsibilities list for TAs versus embedded tutors. And then this next question, I think we pretty much already touched on this. How do you ensure tutors are not turning into lab assistants with embedded in a lab section? I think the answer would be similar to the faculty who try to use them as TAs.
Yeah, it's really just trying to focus the instructor and remind them that the student is really there to help the students with the content and trying to clarify the content. They're not there to help set up labs. They're not there to, bring out lab materials. They're there to work with the students on the content and clarifying that content, and really emphasizing that. And we've had to do that a few times.
Yeah. And then next question, how soon before the semester does onboarding start, and how long before the semester do you usually meet with instructors to do the certification process?
Good question. We do our onboarding. If it is a brand new tutor, we try and do it as soon as we can and get them onboarded and ready to go before the semester starts. I've got a few that are in the hiring process now. I'm hoping that we can get them onboarded the week of the semester starting, because I think our institution starts on a Thursday, so I'm hoping that maybe I can get them onboarded that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that they're ready to go for class on the first day of class. I think it's really important that the tutor try and be in there at the beginning of class if possible, so that way they really see that person as part of the class and not just another person that just pops into class once in a while. So the more that they can really be worked into the class, they see them as not just like an outsider in the class, but they're really just another tool to be used in the class, the better off that we are with the program. What was the second part of that question? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Let me double check. Sorry, I was. How long before the semester do you usually meet with instructors to do the certification process?
Usually once they request, we try and at least reach out to them once they've requested within a week of their request to be like, hey, I received your request. I see that you're interested in such and such person. I will start working with them. Is there anything new? If it's a returning tutor and returning instructor, is there anything new I need to know about your program that's changing? That might change what the embedded tutor is going to be doing in the class. And then I go from there. And usually, depending on if it's like fall to spring, usually it's pretty consistent. If it's summer, a lot of times the communication tends to drop off a little bit. I try and at least reach out to them before the spring ends, and then we start working with them again when it gets closer to the fall. As far as the certification programs, I think that was part of the question too. We generally try and do a couple of trainings towards the end of the previous semester, to start getting the instructors thinking about it. Are they wanting to do it? If they're already wanting to do it, let's get them certified so they can get their request in, and we still have plenty of time to hire if we have to hire somebody. So we usually do about 2 or 3 trainings each semester, before the previous one ends, to make sure that the instructors are still on contract and that we have enough time to get our side of the things done and we're not holding up the tutor being placed in the class.
Awesome. We still have a decent number of people in here. This is actually the last question we have right now. Do your embedded tutors actually enroll in the course? I would imagine not while they're being embedded tutors.
No, our tutors have to have already completed the course before we allow them to tutor in any of the courses that they are a tutor for. So they cannot take the class and be the tutor at the same time. We do place them into the course shell. Like we have our IT folks place them into the shell so that they can see all the same things that the students are seeing, but they don't get a grade or they don't have to do any of the assignments or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so I think that's all the questions we have. That was very, thank you so much for your time, Shauna. That was very generous of you, and great information. So, what's going to happen next for everybody? When you leave the session, you'll be redirected to a survey. We will send out the recording along with all the materials that have already been uploaded and any other materials Shauna is able to share. I will make a list of everything requested and what she's able to share. I'm sure she will if that's doable. I want to remind everybody about our upcoming conference. I am repasting that into the chat, so you should see the link if you want to learn more about our live event. It's going to be a really good time. Sandra McGuire will be our keynote. We have lots of great breakout sessions and other networking opportunities planned for academic center professional development. And also, if you are interested in a semester trial of academia, that is a center management tracking software, you can reach me, Rachel C. at Engineerica.com. I'm happy to answer any questions and help you get connected for that. And again, I want to thank you so much, Shauna, for your flexibility today and for giving us this great presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day and a great start to your fall semester.
Yeah, thank you very much again for letting me come and talk today. And I'd be happy to chat with anybody else if they have any questions outside of here.
Yeah, you can always feel free, if anybody does have questions, forward those to me, and I will make sure they get to Shauna. If you're not able to contact her directly, I can make that happen. I'm seeing lots of this new GoToWebinar lets people give like emoji responses, so people are
Aw.
sending a lot of claps and hearts. So thank you, everybody, and we will be sending out that recording soon, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.